Thank you for tuning into the Hacking the Patriarchy podcast. I'm your fervent feminist host, Raven O'Neill, and I get the honors of sitting down with women experts from all walks of life to discuss the ideas, opportunities, and the strategies that women can take advantage of to get ahead in our patriarchal society. So, if one of your love languages is learning how to hack patriarchal systems and structures, I invite you to join us and help move the needle. I'm excited to welcome today's guest, Sarah Elder. Sarah is an executive coach and business consultant with a passion for helping women win. As a former CEO who built a $20 million plus company, Sarah now dedicates herself to empowering women founders and executives to achieve success on their own terms. With a career spanning over 20 years, Sarah's journey from being the first employee of a small art consulting firm to leading a 100-person organization has equipped her with the invaluable insights into building, scaling, and leading businesses. In her roles as COO and CEO, she led her former company through acquisition, the loss of a founder, and the devastating toll that COVID took on the business, learning hard lessons that she now brings as wisdom to her coaching and consulting work. Known for her no-bullshit approach and deep empathy, she helps her clients crush their goals, own their time, and get more wins at work and beyond. She understands the challenges faced by women in business, and her coaching empowers women to break free from patriarchal programming and write their own rules for success. She's a champion for her clients, helping them keep the wind in their sails as they go after their boldest dreams. Along with her badassery as a business owner, Sarah is a mom of 2 awesome teens, a partner to 1 hottie man, and an avid enthusiast of fitness, food, and fun. Her love for life and commitment to squeezing joy out of it infuses her coaching style with vibrant energy and authenticity. Let's give a warm welcome to Sarah. Welcome, Sarah. I am super excited to have you joining me today to dive into all things change, which is always inevitable in entrepreneurship. It's change all day, every day. And I'm super excited to have this conversation with you. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I am excited to be here. It's lovely to be spending time with you.
Yeah, it's exciting. So change, most of us don't like change, but it is inevitable in entrepreneurship. And I think diving into change in entrepreneurship, a great starting place is your background. We'd had a discussion offline about your background, but I think it's imperative to the conversation. So would you mind giving us a little background?
Yeah, sure. So career story is what we're looking for a bit of. Yeah, definitely. Okay. So I graduated from college with a business degree and accepted my first job as a part-time administrative assistant working out of the home of a husband and wife founder who started an art company. Never would have imagined I'd be working for an art company coming out of school with a business degree, but I was just looking for someone to give me a chance and get my foot in the door so I could prove that I was good and I would work hard and could just start building my career. So from day one, it was an interesting experience to go there and work from their home in a spare bedroom. And the 3 of us together then built the business. And we became an art consulting company. So we curated artwork for commercial spaces. And we grew over the course of about 15 years. We grew from 3 people to 100 people. We grew from 300,000 in revenue to over 20 million in revenue. And every step of the way, I was just learning and growing and becoming the leader that I would one day be proud to be. I would say at about 10, 12 years in, we hit this period of just intense change. We were acquired by private equity, which was a completely shocking experience for myself, who had never been through that before. And I'd be happy to talk as much about that as you'd like. And then unfortunately, around that same time, we also lost Jesse, our founder, to cancer. So we lost him during the acquisition process, went through with the acquisition. A year later, we acquired one of our competitors. All this time, I'm the COO, the chief operating officer in the company. And then COVID happened. So it was just like one fucking thing after the next, just hammering us with really difficult change. It was a time where everyone just felt unstable. They felt like they couldn't trust that things were going to become safe feeling again. And then, of course, being an art consulting company and selling art to commercial spaces, COVID was really devastating to us. So most of our clients were in the hospitality industry. Hotels aren't making money. They're not buying art. We probably went down about 40% in revenue during that time. And my colleague David and I were just running the show and just trying to keep it together. And for both of us, like being in this company and growing this company and running it was all we ever knew of business. So everything that we knew about entrepreneurship, about building and scaling a business came from this experience. And so we hadn't been through any of those things before, and it was all new to us. And the whole company was looking to us to make them feel okay and give them reassurance that we were going to somehow get through this. Through COVID, we went through the furloughs, the layoffs, the pay cuts, all of the things that a lot of people went through. It was very devastating to the business. And then I did step up as CEO during that time, got us through to starting to see light again and believing in the ability to start regaining some of that revenue and profit. And then I decided it was time to peace out and pass the torch. And so I went through a whole other major change in exiting this company that I had been with for almost 17 years. That was in a lot of ways my baby as much as anyone else's, and decided to take the leap and start my own thing doing coaching and consulting. So I went from running the show with 100 people to being solo and starting my very own business for the first time and building that from the ground up. PS also went through a divorce during this time. So that was a fun extra curveball that came into play during this whole period of intense change. So that was moving out of my house, navigating custody issues, going through all the bullshit that happens when you go through a divorce. And somehow have found myself on the other side of all that, living the life that I always wanted, and things are really good now. So yeah, that's the hopefully quick and dirty version of my background and how I got to where I am today.
Well, good. Congratulations on getting to the other side.
Yes.
That is a lot of change, which makes you the perfect guest to talk about change. I want to dive into that a little bit more because obviously acquisition and stepping into a role of CEO and then exiting are all three major changes, which what I found fascinating is, of course, the topic du jour of this podcast is hacking the patriarchy, how men and women do things differently in life, specifically this season in business. And so it's, if I was tracking it correctly, the acquisition happened when your male founder was still alive, or it started in that process. And
That's
so
correct.
Do you feel, having seen how he started the process and was in the process, and then you picking it up when you did as the CEO, that men and women approach and navigate change differently?
Yeah, very good question. So yes, you're correct. So we had started the conversation with the private equity firm probably about 6 months before his diagnosis. And so he was diagnosed in January of 2017, and we lost him about 6 months later. It was incredibly fast and shocking. And the closing of the acquisition happened about another 6 months after that. So it was like about a 1.5 year process from start to finish. So I'll say this in answering your question. Jesse, as a man, was one of the most kind, respectful humans that never, ever treated me differently than he did anyone else. So under his leadership, under his mentorship, when I worked for him, I never felt like I was treated differently because I was a woman. And that was an amazing experience, and one that I probably took for granted to a degree because I didn't know anything different at the time, because this was my first job. So I started with him, and he always believed in me and always did everything possible to support me and encourage me and uplift me. And I was his second in command from almost day one. His wife was involved in the business as well, but she was more over the creative direction of the business. So she was overseeing a very specific function of it and crushing it over there. And so I was like running the show with him and was making sure the trains run on time and keeping everything going and starting to manage people and grow the team and whatnot. And so throughout all of that, I felt incredibly supported and encouraged by him and never felt like I was treated any differently. So it was a little bit of a shock to my system when we were acquired by private equity, because that was when I started to experience what it's like to be a woman in leadership and how that can actually be a very challenging experience. So to answer your question, I don't know that how Jesse was navigating it versus how I was navigating it in terms of the acquisition itself was very different because we were very much a team, very much a partnership, and just it felt very equitable. It felt very aligned, if that makes sense. Once we were acquired by private equity, I saw pretty quickly how the group of white men who now owned us didn't 100% believe in me, I think, as much as Jesse did. They were supportive and they were encouraging, but there started to be little signs along the way that they saw me as maybe not as skilled or capable as some of the male CEOs of their other portfolio companies. And so over the course of the 5 or so years that I worked under them, I really got my first exposure to what that experience is like being a woman in leadership who doesn't necessarily get the same respect or treated the same as men in leadership. I hope that answers your question to some degree. Sorry.
No, it does. And it leads to my next question, which is outside of finally stepping away, how do you approach that? How do you navigate that when those kinds of things happen? Because yes, I think you were very lucky to have it later. It's prevalent out there when you're in business, especially when you are either dealing with your board or you come onto a company that has a board. There is that side of the experience. 100%. And not every woman is going to experience it. But those who do, how did you navigate it? How did you approach it?
Yeah, the honest answer to that is not very well. Hindsight being 2020, there are still moments when I look back on some of the things that I experienced and I almost get mad at myself in a way, like, why didn't I stand up for myself more or advocate for myself more? But because that's what we fucking do. Like we question ourselves when that kind of thing happens, right? Like we find ourselves in these positions. And even though we know what's happening and we feel a little bit uncomfortable about maybe like I was paid less, for example, and we can get into more details on that if you want, you start to turn inward. I think a lot of women will do that. And that's what wound up happening with me and saying, maybe it is because I don't have as much experience. Maybe it's because I shouldn't be paid as much because these people, the men that are running their portfolio companies, have been doing this longer and have run bigger companies. And so that imposter syndrome piece comes into play and you start to question yourself. And so in the moments as I was living the experience, I don't think that I had developed the tools yet to do anything about it. I think I was still in a place of allowing it to feed my self-doubt and allowing it to make me question my worth, honestly. And that whole experience and having some regrets over not doing more to stand up for myself and not doing more to go after what I really wanted and deserved is some of what led to my desire to be a coach for women and to work with other women and executives and business owners and to help them in ways that I didn't receive help, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think that if I had known and felt as confident, if I know what I know now and felt as confident as I did now, I would have straight up put my foot down and been like, this is unacceptable, and confronted it and approached it with them and asked for the equitable treatment and asked for the equitable pay, knowing that I may not be received very well when I did, but knowing that's what I deserved and feeling confident enough to ask for that. But I didn't. Yeah, the honest answer is that I didn't.
Oh gosh, I have so many questions. And probably uncomfortable questions. The first one that came to mind is, do you think it would have been different if there had been more women in the private equity company?
I'd like to hope so. There was one woman on our board of advisors who was amazing. I should have made better use of her as a mentor than I did. Again, hindsight, right? Because she was someone that I deeply admired and who I always felt respected by and treated the same as anyone else. And I think I could have learned a lot more from her if I had taken more advantage of that opportunity to do. Shame on me for not. But I would like to think that if it had been either a private equity firm owned and run by women, or if there had been more women involved, that it would have been a different experience. That is my hope. It's hard to say for sure, right? Because I think sometimes you have those situations where maybe the partners are male and they have a couple or a few women working for them. And those women aren't necessarily advocating for the female executives in the portfolio companies any more than the males are, because they're under the same pressure and they're feeling the same self-doubt in doing so. And maybe they don't want to rock the boat. So if you're in a situation where the people really in charge are men, it doesn't always matter if there's more women at the table, because they're feeling some of the same things that you are, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if when you had meetings with them, if you had advocated to have more women in the room, even if they weren't the ones overseeing the board and overseeing operations and all of that, if it would have made a difference. We'll never know, because
we'll never know. I think theoretically, yes, it could, right? And I totally understand that logic of having another woman in the room, having another woman that is part of the board of advisors. That did help make a difference for sure. But for my particular situation, given the people that I worked for, this particular firm that I worked for, who were good humans. Don't get me wrong. I don't mean to paint a picture that these were bad people, because they weren't. They were good humans. But I don't think in my particular situation that it would have made much of a difference. I think that these particular gentlemen who ran this group were maybe largely unaware of the fact that they were even doing it, that they were even treating me differently, and that having one or two or more women probably wouldn't have had an impact, unfortunately. Yeah.
My mind went there too, is that even most making terrible assumptions, most people don't want to hurt other people. They don't want to intentionally deter, hurt, or anything, but they might not know any better.
It's not malicious, at least in this case. I did not feel that it was malicious in any way. I think in some cases it absolutely is. In my case, I don't feel that it was malicious. I think it was... It's not their fault. They're also a product of the patriarchy. They grew up with their own programming and are behaving in is as a result of it. Could they do the work to bring more awareness to it and try to be better about it? Yeah, that's where I would like to see them change, is to bring awareness to the fact that this is an issue and try to actually do something about it.
Let's take a moment to circle back to the topic of change, because you did mention all of the changes that your path went through, including scaling, which is a big change that usually isn't the first thing you think of change. Like when I think of change, I think of big pivots. Layoffs on the other side of that end up as change. But going through these changes, do you feel like in hindsight, you could have done things differently to plan or to address change differently?
I actually think we did a really good job given what we faced. The short answer is sure, of course. There's always lessons to be learned. Whenever you navigate a hard time or a change or a pivot or scaling or any of it, there are always lessons to be learned. There's always something that could have been improved or could have been done differently. However, I'm very proud of how we navigated these things. I feel that we were very intentional about it. And both in my experience working with Jesse, the founder, and then my colleague, David, who ran the company with me, together we ran it in Jesse's absence. I was lucky in both of those cases to be working alongside a man who did respect and treat me well and who valued my input and who cared as much about people and culture and were compassionate and empathic in the same ways that I was. So all of that played into us being very intentional and planful about how we navigated each of these things, how we communicated with the organization about things like the acquisition and then later the layoffs. Going through layoffs was the hardest fucking thing I've ever done running a business. It was awful. These are people, like, I let go of people who I had worked with for over a decade. It was really sad, really sad. And I don't know that I would have done it any differently than we did. We were so thoughtful and so intentional every step of the way about making sure that navigating this difficult time, we brought every ounce of compassion we could to the situation, that we were incredibly communicative and transparent, that we did everything possible to help people beyond their time with us and set them up on a path to whatever was next. And yeah, I don't think I would change anything about that. If I had to point to one thing maybe to do differently along the way, get involved in like peer groups and get more outside support faster than I did. Sometimes I think we just believe that we have to do it all ourselves and figure it all out. And that's bullshit. And in fact, the worst thing to do when you're in a leadership role or running a business or an entrepreneurial role is to think that you have to figure it all out and do it all by yourself. So I was lucky in that I had a built-in mentor with Jesse, but in losing him, there were some gaps in terms of who do I turn to? Who's my support person? I think the private equity firm did their best to try to serve that function, but I didn't have that type of relationship with them where I really trusted that they had my best interests in mind. So I probably should have hired a coach sooner. I should have gotten myself into peer groups sooner and sought outside support and people that weren't so like deeply ingrained in the company, but could be that more objective, neutral source of support. That's maybe the one thing in hindsight that I would say I would do differently is get that support system in place faster than I did.
I love that because it brought me to the question of, you mentioned peer groups and these communities and all of that. And I feel like when you're first starting out in business, you might not even know they exist.
That's
and
right.
If you do, you might not know where to look. And sometimes you can be flooded with too many and the wrong ones. Where might you recommend women entrepreneurs just getting started and needing that support might start to look?
Ooh, that is a great question. And you're absolutely right. It's a tough one because especially in the virtual world that we exist in at this point, there's so many options. So I think the very easiest first place is to ask around to the people you already know, right? Assuming you have at least some people in your network that you like and trust, ask them if they're involved in any networking groups or peer groups that they would recommend and that they've enjoyed, or vice versa. Have you participated in something that you wouldn't recommend and that you would suggest that maybe I think that's like the lowest hanging fruit there is turn to the other people that in your industry or in your business world and your networking world and ask them what they've done or what they've tried. From there, I do personally prefer to do local. I think there's a lot more to be gained from in-person options. So that helps to narrow the options in not just like reaching out to every little virtual thing that's out there, but looking at the stuff that might be more local to you. I think that's really valuable. So that's just research. Honestly, it's Googling like women's networking groups, women's peer groups. Usually most of them will give you the opportunity to come as a guest. And so you just test it out. It's like dating in a way. You got to find the one that works for you. P.S. I haven't dated in 25 years, so I don't really know what dating is like anymore. But I think it's like dating. I don't know. There's no fucking Tinder or whatever people are doing these days. I'm so out of that game at this point. But I feel like it's got to be similar to dating in the sense that you don't want to just jump right in and sign up for the first one, that you should really test the waters. And I think that's true for any support relationship that you are seeking, whether it's a therapist or a coach or a peer group or a networking group, any of those things that you are considering to be part of your overall support network. Test the waters, talk to people, interview people, go as a guest to an event and see what you think about the vibe. See if it just feels good in your body. See if it feels, oh, I can connect to these people. Because the best results that you can possibly achieve from any of those situations are going to be when you feel safe and when you feel like you belong and when you feel connected and when you are with people that just make you feel good. Yeah, don't rush into anything, I think is the moral of that story, maybe.
Don't rush into anything. I want to get back to the question of change, and I'm hoping that I don't butcher the direction of this question, but I was thinking about big vision change, such as your strategic plan for the next 5, 10 years. Like that's going to have change involved, almost change you can, to a degree, predict or estimate. And then you have the things that happen like COVID that no one plans for, that you have to pivot much quicker and almost don't have the time to plan for. And it also makes me think about, I'm slow to digest it and come to a decision. Like you are not going to get a snap decision from me, rarely. So just with what you've seen, how the difference between men and women approach navigating long-term strategic change and also immediate change. And if there hasn't been a difference, then like how you might deal with the differences. Is it a good idea to say, let me get back to you in 3 days? Or is it a need an answer now? And it's okay to give those quick answers that I never do.
Yeah. To answer that question first, the last question first, of course, it's okay to say, I'll get back to you. And I think that that's guidance that I would give to anyone. Gender doesn't matter in this particular situation. If you are asked a question or your team is looking to you for answers, or you are facing a decision or a terrible thing like COVID, it's 100% okay to say, here's what I do know, and here's what I don't know. And on the what I don't know, here's what I'm doing to figure it out. You don't have to have all the answers. I think that sometimes as women, we can believe that we need to have all the answers because we might believe that if we don't, then people are going to think that we're not good enough, or that we're stupid, or that we're not talented enough. But I actually have not found that to be true. So I've had those thoughts myself in the past, but upon learning this lesson myself, this lesson of it's 100% okay to say there are aspects that I don't know that I need to figure out, and I'm going to work on that and get back to you, has always been received. In fact, probably better than if I just tried to fake it or wing it, right? Because people appreciate transparency so much. And they appreciate seeing that you are willing to tell them, that you trust them enough, that you are willing to tell them that there are things that you don't know yet. That makes people feel good and trusted and respected. And they're like, great, fine. You told me you don't know, and you're going to work on it, and you're going to get back to me, and that's okay. So I don't know that I would like assign any gender role to that. Is that more a woman thing or a man thing in that particular situation? I just think that's a good leadership thing, honestly, especially when you're navigating hard shit. A good leadership thing is to tell them what you know and what you don't know, and then tell them that you're working on the things that you don't know. More generally, in terms of gender roles, I think that everyone has self-doubt. Everyone goes through imposter syndrome, but men might be more likely to hide that and just like charge through it and at least pretend like they're confident and pretend like they know what they're doing. I think that's where you might visibly see a difference in how a woman versus a man might handle a situation like this. But I'll just bring that back to my first answer, which is that's not necessarily a good thing. Like just showing up and being like, yeah, it's fine. I've got this. Don't worry, everyone. And putting your big macho pants on and being like, I'm the boss. I've got it all figured out. That might be more likely to happen with a man than a woman, but I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. And this concept of, and I've heard this from people before, of like, how can women maybe step into some of the ways that men show up as leaders or adopt some of those ways? I would actually say don't, right? Don't act like a man. We know what we're doing. We just have to trust ourselves and believe in ourselves more. We're actually better leaders on the whole. And that's not true 100% of the time. I don't mean to say that every single woman is a better leader than every single man, because you cannot make that generalization. But on the whole, women bring more compassion and more empathy and more vulnerability to the table when they lead, and that makes them better leaders. So don't be like a man. Don't try to do things the man's way. Just if there was anything at all that I would say to borrow, it's believing in ourselves. Like we just need to believe in ourselves more. We don't need to have bravado about it. We don't need to be overly confident. We don't need to be cocky, and we certainly don't need to be assholes and step on other people to get what we want out of life, which are men things sometimes, but we do need to believe in ourselves. And we do need to do whatever work is necessary to find out why we don't believe in ourselves so we can squash that. And we do need to break free from the programming, from the patriarchy that has led to us not believing in ourselves and led to us feeling less than and led to us questioning our moves and motives and whatnot. If we can find the root of that and do the work, whether it's in therapy or coaching or peer groups or whatever with our friends, because we're all dealing with the same shit. If we just talk about it and we work through it and we believe in ourselves more, we've got all the rest of it already. We're awesome leaders. We're awesome business owners. We have all those things. We have the innate ability to do those things well. We just have to get out of our own fucking way.
Thank you for that answer. Yes. Which, yeah, exactly. And you partially answered my next question with some of that, but maybe there's something you want to layer on, which is going back to your story and inevitable change, acquisition, losing a dear mentor and a boss and the leader of a company and going through a divorce. That's a lot at once. And I feel like I'm a big believer in threes. I'm like, something happens and then something else happens. I'm like, where's the third one, universe? Send it my way. We're going to have it in threes. When you have change in multiple places in your life, how do you recommend navigating that? Again, you mentioned the peer groups and all these ways, pulling other people in and doing all the things to get the support. But what else might you recommend? What did you do?
Yeah. Support for sure, like therapy, 100%. There's definitely therapy involved in every aspect of the changes that I navigated. And coaching. I have worked with coaches for a long time now. I maybe got started a little late on that in my career. As I mentioned before, that's something I wish I could have done and would have done sooner. But getting that one-on-one support from people who are mental health professionals and also people in the coaching world who are maybe a few steps farther along than you, or maybe have gone through some of these things before so that they can offer wisdom from their own experiences. That's a huge part of it. But I think maybe not. And in addition to that, I made it a priority to take care of myself. And I know that is one of the hardest things for us, especially women, to do, because we are constantly catering to other people's needs and putting other people ahead of ourselves. And I knew that if I didn't take care of myself through all of that hot mess that I was navigating, that I would fall apart at the seams and not make it. I knew that I had to get my sleep. Sleep is really important to me. And sure, there were nights when I didn't sleep well because I was stressing about every little thing that was happening. But I would take the steps that worked for me to ensure that I was getting at least enough sleep. And I knew that I had to exercise. That's very important to me. So I had done the work to understand what my needs are. And I made sure that I was doing the work to meet those needs as much as possible. And that also meant like saying no to some stuff and being really strict with myself about boundaries and knowing that I'm navigating divorce, I'm navigating all this crazy business stuff. Clearly, I can't just keep going at the same speed that I might have before in certain aspects of my life. So some things you just have to let go or even hit pause on. Maybe there's something that this is going to be a really small, silly example, but maybe you're part of a book club with your girlfriends and you decide that for a little while you just can't go, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. Like maybe that's the thing that you're okay with letting go of, because you need to give yourself space to rest. You need to give yourself space to fit in the things that are the most important. So some tough decisions have to be made in that process. Like you do have to maybe sometimes sacrifice things that you might otherwise like to go to, but I think that's okay as long as you are clearly what your priorities and what your needs are, and you are at least meeting the most important ones. Otherwise, like you'll just burn out. You'll just fall apart at the seams. And saying no came into play at work too. Like sometimes people might ask you for things, ask you to be a part of meetings, ask you to contribute, ask you to help with something. And you have to know when to say no. You have to know when to be like, I can't right now, or that's not something I need to be involved in, or I need you to work with this person on that. So yeah, I guess to summarize all of that, know what your needs are, make sure you're meeting them, because if you're not meeting your own needs and you're not taking care of yourself, then you're going to be useless to everyone else around you. And be willing to say no and let go of some things, even if that's a short term, even if that's a pause, so that you're not burning the candle at both ends and wearing yourself out in the process.
And you made me think of like prioritization in that too. Everybody has different priorities. And I think of like the priority when you're starting out in entrepreneurship, glitter's bursting out of your eyes and you're like, I'm going to do all these things. And then all of a sudden you're like, no, I'm not actually going to do all those things. I'm going to do one of those things, and figuring out what that one thing is. It reminds me of holding everything and then all of a sudden everything falls. It's never like, it's all the balls drop or no balls drop.
Yeah, drop some balls, like intentionally drop some balls. That's what it comes down to, right? I think a woman wrote a book about that. I don't remember who it was. I'll have to look that up. But intentionally drop some balls. Like what can be dropped? What can sit? What can be let go forever? What can be handed off to someone else? What's just not the most important thing right now? And your point is a great one, making peace with the fact that some things might just take a little longer than they usually do, or longer than you would like them to. And that's okay if that's what is needed to give yourself the space to just take it one step at a time. Like, you don't have to fix and solve and win everything all at once. In fact, you can't. So just those like tiny steps forward, and acknowledging those tiny steps forward and giving yourself credit for them and celebrating them and being like, okay, maybe I didn't completely solve the issue of divorce this week, because that's fucking insane and you can't do that in a week. But here's what I did do. I took this step forward. So I'm going to pat myself on the back for that. Be happy that I have made it a little bit farther along in the process, and then just take another step forward next week. And just do your best. And your best is going to be different at every stage in your life. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a superhero. Like, just do your best.
Sage advice. That brings us to the part where I start wrapping things up. And I love to wrap the show up with your top 3 hacks around the topic of interest, which ours is handling change. I feel like you've thrown out so many amazing nuggets, so it's okay if they're repeats and we're just hammering it home. But what are your top, you're an entrepreneur, you're in business, and small change, big change is going to happen. What do you do? Your top 3 things to help either your mindset, mitigate the change, deal with the change?
Yeah. Number 1, I'm incredibly biased, but hire a coach. For fuck's sake, hire a coach. Like, it's so important. I'm not the coach for everyone. Like I said earlier, you need to like date around and find the person that makes sense for you and feels good to you. But having that champion in your corner, and I highly recommend it is somebody who is a little bit farther along than you are, somebody that you admire because you've seen what they've accomplished and where they've gone, and you might want to go there too. It doesn't have to be one for one, but there's something about this person and their experience and what they have accomplished that you're like, yeah, I want that. I look up to that. So hire somebody that's a little bit farther along that you can learn from in the process, and let them be your champion. Show up and do the fucking work. Like, hiring a coach isn't the only step. Hire a coach and show up and do the fucking work. Be willing to take action. Be willing to receive feedback. Be willing to be called on your bullshit, and just squeeze every ounce of learning and wisdom and opportunity to grow that you can out of that. That is, in my opinion, the best thing that you can do as an entrepreneur is hire yourself a coach. You cannot and should not do it all by yourself. It's so important. Can that be all 3 of them? That's 1, 2, and 3. Hire a coach. No, I'm just kidding. Okay.
And that brings me to the question of the different coaches too. Like, you can get yourself a personal coach, a business coach.
Sure.
Like, there are so many different kinds of support you can get. Do you have any recommendations on navigating? Obviously, ideally, you have a business coach, life coach, and a therapist, and all the things all at once, but most people don't. So that would
be a lot. I hear what you're saying, and that would be a lot. I do think therapy and coaching can work very successfully in tandem, especially if you have healing work that you need to do. I think that's an important thing to be aware of. If you have healing work that you need to do because of trauma that you have experienced in your life, and listen, every single one of us has experienced some level of trauma in our life, and some of them are little t's and big T's, and we've heard that, and that's the truth. If you have healing work that you need to do that healing work either before or in tandem with your coaching, because things are going to come up in your coaching relationship that are from deep-rooted shit that you are dealing with. Limiting beliefs, thought patterns that are getting in your own way, your stories around things like worth, like money, what success looks like, what it means to be a woman, all the shit that we're programmed with from the patriarchy, like that all is just existing and feasting on our big, beautiful brains. And if we don't go through the healing work to look back, to look in the past and understand where our stories have come from and the things that have given us the perspectives and beliefs that we have today, and understand them and work to undo the ones that are getting in our way, then coaching isn't going to be successful. So I believe it needs to be both. And ideally, you're doing maybe the therapy at least to some degree before the coaching, but in tandem is fine as well. I have a lot of coaching clients who also are in therapy, and they bring stuff to our sessions from their therapy and say, okay, here's something I talked about with my therapist, and I want to now talk about how this shows up in my business relationships, or how this shows up in how I lead people, or how this shows up in me navigating this decision for my business or whatever. So those two, yes. To the other piece of it, like life coaching versus business coaching, I think it just depends on what feels like the most important thing to address. But I do think that a good executive and or business coach is going to bring in aspects of the life coaching anyway, because you can't do one without the other. It's all connected. Like, we are whole humans, and a good executive or business coach is going to work with you as a whole human. They're going to work on the whole person thing. They're not going to be like, oh no, don't talk about your parenting challenges because this is business coaching. They're going to invite it all because it's all related. It's all connected to who you are and how you show up in the world. And yeah, I think it's fine to bring that stuff to your business and executive coaching. I would say, again, biased, but I would say hire a business or executive coach, and one that you know is that you're going to feel safe and trust the space that you have with them to also bring up some of the personal stuff too.
Okay. Hire a coach. Number one.
Oh, wait, I still have to do two more.
I did love knowing how to take care of yourself and setting those priorities. That was a really good one.
Yeah. 100. Yeah, I would. Thank you for giving me the answer. I agree. So I think
you said it.
I know. I got to remember how smart I am. No, I'm just kidding. So knowing what your needs are and meeting them. And I have a fun exercise that I have given to people for that. It's pretty straightforward. You make a list of 100 needs. So what are your 100 needs? And start with the really easy shit, right? Food, water, shelter. Of course, you need those things to live, but then just let it unfold from there. And it doesn't have to happen all at once. Just have your notebook out, work on it over as long as it takes you to. You're going to get like into the 50s and 60s and be like, what else is there? And then you'll just be walking down the street and be like, oh, this. Trees. I need trees in my life. Yeah, that's really important to me. Like, seriously, the idea is not to perfectly get to 100. The idea is to push yourself to go deeper, to really dig in and understand, what do you need to feel like a whole happy human? Whatever that is. I need black coffee every morning. I need to take walks. I need pets. I need to have pets in my life to feel like a whole happy human, like whatever it is. And you'll get to things that are like, I need my partner to hold my hand, or I need to feel respected. Like, just let it go and get really clear with yourself about what those needs are. And then part 2 of that is look at that list and be like, which of these needs are not getting met? And then start to dig into why. So when you'll see things on there where you're like, wow, that's really important to me, and I'm not getting enough of that in my life. How can I change that? Maybe you take that to therapy. Maybe you take that to coaching. Maybe you need to talk to your partner. Maybe you need to talk to your mom. But you should figure out, I hate the word should, I suggest that you figure out which needs are not getting met, and then you do some work to try to change that. And if you are doing that, bringing your awareness to what your needs are and doing the work to make sure that they're getting met and understanding why some of them are not getting met and trying to change, that makes you a more whole, happy person, which makes you more capable of navigating change when it gets thrown at you. Number three, maybe this is a little bit of an obvious cop-out answer, but rest. We have to rest. whatever rest looks like for you. And I know this kind of like folds into the taking care of yourself, but this one I feel very specific about. I am a hard charging, driven person that feels like I just have to be doing something at all times. I have a very difficult time just sitting still. But I have to work on that for myself because I will exhaust myself. I will burn myself out. I will fatigue. I will lose my motivation. I will get to places of feeling defeated if I don't make sure that I rest. And rest can be active. Rest can be going for a walk. If going for a walk outside and listening to music and fresh air and seeing birds makes you feel recharged, that's rest for you. Rest could be running. Like, it doesn't have to actually mean sitting and doing nothing. It just has to mean disconnecting yourself from the go, go, go mentality that so many of us live in, and doing something that refills your battery, that helps you to recharge. Like every fucking day. This is not negotiable, in my opinion. Every fucking day you have to do some version of rest in order to be able to continue carrying through and bringing your powerful, beautiful, amazing self to the world and doing the wonderful work that we all do.
I love it. Hire a coach, make sure your needs are being met, and get some rest.
That's it. It's all easy. Tomorrow, you fix it. Go.
Everything's better. Everything's better. For those tuning in who want to learn more about you, want to reach out, want to connect, how can they do that?
Yeah. So my website is my name, sarahelder.com. That's Sarah with an H, ELDER. I am on Instagram as @Coach Sarah Elder and on LinkedIn as Sarah Elder. So those are probably the top 3 places where you can find me. I love hearing from people. So email me, message me. If you find my phone number somehow, I don't know where it would be, but if you do, call me. I love phone call. Like, more of us should talk on the phone. But yeah, that's how you can find me. And in each of those places, there is also a link. If you are interested in exploring coaching with me, there's a link where you can book a free consultation. And that's just 30 minutes to meet me, get to know me, decide if you like my vibe and energy and you want to keep the conversation going.
I love it. And I will put all of that in the show notes. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an amazing conversation.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I love spending time with you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks again. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to today's episode. For all the juicy deets on this episode, be sure to check out our show notes or give us a holler on Instagram at Hacking the Patriarchy Podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support this podcast, don't be shy. Please share it with your friends. Sharing is caring after all. Lastly, if you'd like to lend your personal support, please take a moment to tell the world about it with a review on your favorite streaming platform. We'd be forever grateful. Tune in again soon to enjoy a brand new episode of the Hacking the Patriarchy podcast. And until next time, keep on hacking, my friends. If you've made it this far, I have one more little thing to share with you. Did you know that this isn't my only feminist endeavor? That's right, there's more. I run a media startup dedicated to providing the most current and pertinent news about women, for women, and by women. Our mission centers on delivering a platform where the latest updates regarding women-led initiatives are extensively covered, highlighting women's actions, accomplishments, perspectives, and other elements that profoundly influence women's lives and contribute to meaningful progress. I invite you to head over to femled.news to learn more.